973-7425. This hour is sponsored by Dynamic Money, my personal financial advisor. And they really are, and they were before they sponsored the show. That's why they're sponsoring the show, because they've gotten to be friends of mine. Happy to support it. Chris Burns, who fills in for me, filled in on Tuesday. He is the president of Dynamic Money. Great financial planners. You want retirement planning, you want budgeting advice, all that good stuff. Want to learn a family budget, everything you need to be financially independent. Call Dynamic Money. You can go to dynamicmoney.com, get more information from them. You can see anywhere over Georgia. They'll join you by FaceTime, video chat, on the phone, you name it. They are super accessible. If you're anywhere in the nation, frankly, you can reach out to dynamicmoney.com. Now, there is a huge story. I was actually going to put this off. I was going to put it off until the second hour, but it has suddenly exploded thanks to Jake Tapper from CNN. Let me get to this story from the New York Times this morning. Big story. There are 4 reporters on this story: Adam Goldman, Julian Barnes, Maggie Haberman, and Nicholas Fandos. The headline: lawmakers are warned that Russia is meddling to re-elect Trump. Subtitle: a classified briefing to House members is said to have angered the president, who complained the Democrats would weaponize the disclosure. Intelligence officials warned House lawmakers last week that Russia was interfering in the 2020 campaign to try to get President Trump reelected. 5 people familiar with the matter said a disclosure to Congress that angered Mr. Trump, who complained that Democrats would use it against him. The day after the February 13th briefing to lawmakers, the president berated Joseph Maguire, the outgoing acting director of national intelligence, for allowing it to take place. People familiar with the exchange said Mr. President was particularly irritated that Representative Adam B. Schiff, Democrat of California, and the leader of the impeachment proceedings, was at the briefing. During the briefing to the House Intelligence Committee, Mr. Trump's allies challenged the conclusions, arguing that he had been tough on Russia and he had strengthened European security. Pay attention to this paragraph. Let me read this again. This is important. During the briefing to the House Intelligence Committee, Mr. Trump's allies challenged the conclusion, arguing he had been tough on Russia and had strengthened European security. Notice the New York Times does not actually say he has actually been tough on Russia and strengthened European security, but he actually has. This president has actually been tougher on Russia than the prior administration. He's actually done more to send defensive armaments to Eastern Europe than the past president did. But no, notice they can't bring that up. Some intelligence officials viewed the briefing as a tactical error, saying the conclusions could have been delivered in a less pointed manner or left out entirely to avoid angering Republicans. The intelligence official who delivered the briefing, Shelby Pearson, is an aide to Mr. Maguire and has a reputation for speaking bluntly. Though intelligence officials had previously told lawmakers that Russia's interference campaign was continuing, last week's briefing included what appeared to be new information that Russia intended to interfere with the 2020 Democratic primaries as well as the general election. Oh, smelling salts, please. We're going to faint now. The Russians are stealing the election for President Trump. Again, they're stealing the election for President Trump. You know, it's not a coincidence that they're pushing this story the day after the Quinnipiac poll shows in the swing states Donald Trump is cruising to re-election. It's the Russians. It's not the Americans. It's the Russians. To some degree, what we see in the press now is absolution journalism. A buddy of mine has mentioned this several times. He's a big proponent of the theory absolution journalism, that the media covers stories in a way to absolve Democrats of any sin. All the sins are on the Republicans, and increasingly what it is they want to absolve the American public of sins and blame the Russians. You can't blame the American people, because the American people, we can't tell them they're bad. Only the Trump people are bad and stupid. It's not the other Americans, those independents who are falling for Trump. It's got to be the Russians. It must be the Russians. You're absolved of believing Donald Trump because the Russians are lying to you on Facebook. You know, interestingly enough, CNN story is that the Russians actually are not trying to steal the election for Donald Trump. They're just trying to undermine everyone's confidence in the election again. They're probing weaknesses in the election. Now, all of this is blown up significantly all of a sudden because Jake Tapper, I'm sorry that conserva Twitter tells me that Jake Tapper is not trustworthy and we can't believe Jake Tapper and no one should pay attention to Jake Tapper and Jake Tapper's bad. I actually think he's a fine guy and a great reporter. Let me read you what Jake Tapper says this morning. He began tweeting an hour ago. A national security official I know and trust pushes back on the way the briefing story is being told, and others with firsthand knowledge agree with his assessment. Now, you will note only 5 people, all of them Democrats, 5 people gave the New York Times the story. What's been articulated in the news is that the intelligence community has concluded the Russians are trying to help Trump again, but the intelligence doesn't say that, the official said. The problem is Shelby Pearson, the person who briefed Congress. The New York Times described as rather blunt. The elections threats executive in the intelligence community said they developed a preference for Trump. A more reasonable interpretation of the intelligence is not that they have a preference. It's a step short of that. It's more that they understand the president is someone they can work with. He's a deal maker, but not that they prefer him over Sanders or Buttigieg or anyone else. So it may have been mischaracterized by Shelby at the House Intelligence Briefing last week. And by the way, the official says, both Democrats and Republicans were challenging this at the briefing. Then there's the matter of the tense meeting between President Trump and erstwhile acting director of intelligence, Admiral McGuire. The president was upset that he had to hear about an intelligence conclusion from a member of the House Republicans rather than from the intelligence community. So he was out of joint with McGuire on the process. None of this disputes that Trump desires to replace those who have intelligence experience with partisan loyalists or dismisses the larger issues and concerns about Russia and how the president seeks help from abroad. But that just seems to be more to this particular story. Also, none of this disputes that the Russians and others are attempting to interfere in the U.S. election again. In other words, and in fact, let me get to this, how the CNN spin on the story. And the CNN spin came before the, ironically, I was going to talk about this in the second hour, but then it just kind of blew up in the last hour. See, I'm flexible because I'm a professional. And it's Jim Acosta writing the story, but Dana Bash is involved, and Dana Bash is a very, very fair person. They say the briefer said Russia does favor Trump, but that helping Trump wasn't the only thing they were trying to do, as it was designed to raise questions about the integrity of the election process. Then Russia wants to engage in hacking, weaponizing social media, and attacking election infrastructure. Now, again, a couple of things to draw out of Jake Tapper's reporting. Tapper is an exceedingly fair reporter. And a couple of things to draw out of it. One, yes, the Russians, when they look at the field of Democrats versus Republicans, they're thinking Donald Trump is someone we can do business with, not that Donald Trump is going to be pro-Russia. Wait until it gets to be Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump. Then they'll realize, hey, we not only have someone we can do business with in the race, we have one of our own in the race. And then they'll, it really is funny. As Bernie Sanders rises, an actual communist who actually honeymooned in the Soviet Union and actually defended Soviet breadlines and actually defended Fidel Castro and actually defended Hugo Chavez and actually defended Nicolas Maduro and actually defended all these other communists in the world and actually defended communist command and control policies and actually defended communist authoritarianism and actually defended Karl Marx and actually defended Das Kapital and actually defended the role communism plays. Wants Trump, what? Russia wants Trump because they're about to get Bernie Sanders, making that up, right? Union. When Sanders defended command and did all these things. Have you heard it in the media? Is skyrocketing in the polls for the Democrats. Suddenly the media says, it's Russia and Trump. It's Russia and Trump. It's all about Trump. And here comes Jake Tapper saying, whoa, wait a second. This isn't about Donald Trump. This is about undermining the American election. The president isn't mad at the director of national intelligence for telling Congress this stuff. He's mad that the director of national intelligence didn't tell him first. But the media can't do that. They can't say that because that would be, dare I use the word, that would be fair. It would be fair. And the media's got a narrative, and the narrative is directly opposed to the president and in favor of the Democrats. So when we have the communist sympathizer, Bernie Sanders, as the Democratic nominee, it's all going to be about how Donald Trump is the pawn of the Soviet Russians or whatever. Except we know that's not true. And it's further going to undermine the media. You know, one of the interesting things that's going to happen in the 2020 race is that all of the opposition research on Bernie Sanders, the media reaction to it is not going to be to ignore it. And this is you need to pay attention to this, man. If I could log this file, February 21st, 9:17 a.m., almost 9:18 here, and log it to play it back later this year. It is not that the media is going to say the opposition research on Bernie Sanders doesn't exist, because it does. What they're going to say is that it's old news. It wasn't effective on him in the primary, but it's already been covered. It's old news now. We don't need to re-talk about this stuff. This stuff's already been out there. You know it's going to happen that way. But that's going to further undermine trust in the national media. It's going to further undermine trust in the national media being able to influence Americans, which is a good thing. You know, honest to goodness, this goes back to the story the other day. The Russians have started putting Sputnik radio on air in Kansas City, Missouri, and elsewhere. Around the country, the Russians are buying up airtime in the United States to run Russian propaganda as standard talk radio fare in the United States. And the reason they can do it, and the reason they can get away with it, and the reason there is a market for it, although subsidized for Russia, so maybe not the market they think it is or want you to believe it is, but the reason they can do all of this stuff is because American distrust of the media has skyrocketed to an all-time high. The American media makes everything about Donald Trump, including Russian interference in the election, when the underlying premise of it, according to the actual intelligence report, and by the way, note Jake Tapper says even Democrats in the committee briefing were pushing back on the idea that Russia actually favored Donald Trump and wanted to get him reelected. But the Russians can do all of this because the American media has made everything about Donald Trump. Everything is about Donald Trump. And they ignore any story that has no tie-in to Donald Trump. Remember, the media covered the Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, Megxit breakup thing because they didn't want to move to the United States because Donald Trump was president. The moment that was old news, they had to move on to a different angle. The coronavirus situation, notice how the media is actually covering. There's actually a CNN story. Let me find this. I bookmarked this, and we'll get to it. Yes. This is an actual CNN story on CNN.com. What's spreading faster than coronavirus in the United States? Racist assaults and ignorant attacks against Asians. The word Donald Trump does not appear in this story, but you and I both know that the underlying premise of this is, with Donald Trump in the White House, hate and racism is on the rise in the United States, and their people are lashing out at Asians. And they've got like three examples of people, one of which is a viral video. They're way more worried about Chinese people getting their feelings hurt than people dying of the coronavirus. And it's not to say that's right. Don't hear me as defending racist attacks on the Chinese. It's not. I'm happy to go to a Chinese restaurant in New York City. And by the way, did you know that a lot of Asian people, they wear face masks in public because they're super polite. And they don't want to give you germs. They don't want to get your germs. It has nothing to do with people being sick. And when they are sick, they cover their mouth. You don't need to be attacking Asians. But that's not the point here. The point here is there actually isn't a huge amount of this going on in the country or anywhere else in the world. But the media wants to focus on that. In the age of Donald Trump, everyone's a racist. The Russians are stealing it for Donald Trump. Everyone's a racist. It's all bad. We're all going to die. Every story's got to have a Trump angle. And when every story has to have a Trump angle, the media starts ignoring the stories that don't have a Trump angle. How quickly did the media set aside the Boy Scout bankruptcy story? There's no Trump angle there. How quickly did the media move on from the story of the NASCAR driver and the wreck? There's no Trump angle there anymore. The president wasn't there for the wreck. How quickly has the media moved on from impeachment now that the president's poll numbers have gone up? How quickly has the media moved on from the situation in Syria? There's no Trump angle there. How quickly has the media moved on from the Hong Kong situation? There's no Trump angle there. How quickly has the media moved on from every story where there's no Trump angle? So now they've reverted back to just in time for the rise of Bernie Sanders. Oh, the Russians really want Donald Trump to get elected. The Russians are all about helping Donald Trump. No, actually, the Russians just want us at each other's throat. And guess what? It's working, and it's working because the media is willing to do that. The media is willing to stir the pot. The media is willing to have Americans at each other's throats over the 2020 election by misreporting and misrepresenting what's going on. And 5 Democrats leaked to the New York Times and generated a massive story today that the Russians are helping the New York Times. And guess what? It turns out, according to one reporter at CNN who happens to be a good guy, turns out there were Democrats behind closed doors pushing back on that narrative. And you would never know that from the New York Times.
National connections, local focus.
The 9/7, the entire show, a hair on fire thing on the president. The left. 2 clips from the other day.
It's the economy, stupid, and it.
Well, a couple things. Their economy has an economic message that makes sense. The majority of his ad.
When you talk about the economy, these stories, in fact, the BBC has billionaires from LA that they're all of those left behind by the economy. 2 part-time jobs meet. Start to go up, property taxes start to go, people getting left. Suddenly, BBC, they're just the one I saw today. part of the program, 877-9-FREAK-OUT. Go through the freak out, but they don't have to freak out. Going well, likes more than trying to make her happen for a while.
His response, one of his reaction to that.
That just doesn't cut. I think the power relation and who knows where. And then when someone finally, the owner of the company, a lawyer, or I'm going to, is hags and let those women, Democratic nominee.
Seen to come out of
last night in the debate, if I can, about allegations about this, and that I really bound not to tell their side of the story. He can disclosure agreements. This is an election, and I thought I would make this easy. Peace and covenant not to sue, and all that Mayor women or men will be free of any and all obligations between Bloomberg and or the company and any other person, harassment, discrimination, or other misconduct at the company, such information or
it's on her past. On her, you say that we can't happen. But you know, and not on Sanders. Pay it about Sanders. I'll explain why after I play this. Why is she tearing down Bloomberg and not tearing down Sanders?
Trump, I thought it was a terrible night for the Democrats.
The truth is, Bernie,
I am absolutely panicked.
No socialist like Bernie Sanders, we're going to lose. It'll be like George.
You know what pandering gets you? Nothing. It certainly doesn't get your
Lost its way.
I don't see how death sentence for the party.
and say, I disagree with socialism. I believe in the market.
England, Bernie ain't going to work in the.
You know, they got to win in Pennsylvania and Michigan. To lose Michigan. And guess what? According to Quinnipiac, that's exactly what. Michigan and Pennsylvania losing, but barely. He is winning the president, according to Quinnipiac. Now, this is only Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac, their track record's moderate. You got to do the polling average again, but we've got their data. It is worth talking about because everybody else is talking about it. The president is winning Wisconsin, beating every single Democrat from Joe Biden to Mike Bloomberg and everyone else in between. Brutally beats Bernie Sanders in Wisconsin. And he does well against most, but not all of the Democrats in Pennsylvania and Michigan. And Bloomberg actually does well against the president of Pennsylvania. But wait until they get a load of this audio from Bloomberg and the crowd. The crowd is important.
I'll just talk about fighting climate change. I cut New York's carbon footprint by 13% and helped create a grassroots movement to close more than 300 polluting coal-fired power plants across this country.
Going to close the coal-fired power plants across this country. And the crowd goes wild. That's not going to help. That's not going to help. I mean, so listen, again, this is important. Every campaign eventually goes through freak out mode. Every campaign does. And the reason every campaign goes through freak out mode is because there will come a time where the polling suggests things aren't going well for you, and every candidate has a bad week. Everybody's got a bad week. I've had a bad week. Everybody has bad weeks. And when you have bad weeks, you get down, you get depressed. You're why, God, why are you picking on me? You wonder, what have you done to make God mad? And candidates go through that too. Candidates are people. The president goes through it just like the rest of us. He wants to know why other people are mad at him. Well, you know, this is a president who for years was heralded by the press. He was popular. He could go to restaurants and all the celebrities wanted to be seen with him. And then he put an R next to his name. And that was the end of that. This president, you think I'm joking, but I'm not. This president could hold every single belief he currently holds and have a D next to his name. And the Democrats would celebrate him. The Democrats would herald him. How do I know? Because Mike Bloomberg's getting applause from a lot of Democrats out there, and he and Trump have a lot of the same views. How do I know? Because the Democrats hang out with Louis Farrakhan and Jeremiah Wright, and they get a lot of applause. It's that he has an R next to his name that matters. And, you know, that again, that's the thing. Let's go full circle in this hour to the New York Times story, and I'll come back to it in depth here in a little bit. But the New York Times story says that the Russians are trying to steal the election for Donald Trump. Do you know what else the New York Times has? The New York Times has an op-ed from the number 2 of the Taliban. It is terrorist propaganda on the op-ed page of the New York Times. with their problems with the Americans and how bad the Americans are. This is a man who has helped fund al-Qaeda and protected al-Qaeda. He has overseen terrorists who killed Americans. He himself has been involved in the killing of American soldiers. And the New York Times is okay giving this guy an op-ed in the New York Times, a terrorist leader running terrorist propaganda on the op-ed page of the New York Times, which isn't really different from a lot of the editorialists at the New York Times anyway, but still, you get my point. They're worried about the Russians stealing the election, and they're okay with the Taliban. Donald Trump has broken them. They've got Trump derangement syndrome. And, you know, among my peers and friends and colleagues in talk radio land, I tend to defend the press more than most. And the reason I tend to defend the press more than most is because I've worked in the media. I've worked alongside some of these people. I know that they may get it wrong, but they're not intentionally malicious. Some, not all. I'm happy to call some of them out. Some of them I think I get a bad rap. Well, like, for example, Jake Tapper. I know Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper is a friend of mine, and I think Jake Tapper tries very hard to be as fair and balanced as he possibly can. I don't think he gets it always right, and I'll send him a private note on occasion and say, hey, I think you're thinking about this the wrong way. And sometimes he pushes back, sometimes he doesn't. He's a fantastic guy and an exquisitely fair journalist. And conservatives blowing up. But I remember when Democrats were blowing up, when Barack Obama was president. And I said, it was kind of funny, in the last day, like January 19th of 2017, I said, get ready, Jake Tapper. Conservatives are about to hate your guts now. After 4 years of Democrats hating his guts. And sure enough, conservatives, you can't trust Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper's opposed to run. I think he's a fair guy. I don't think he always gets it right, but I think if you're going to listen to a member of the media, Jake Tapper is someone you should listen to. Brett Barrett, Fox News. I think Brett is incredibly fair, incredibly unbiased, super, super fair, and pointed in all of his questions on both sides. I wish I could see a joint CNN Fox debate where it was just Jake Tapper and Brett Barrett asking people questions. That would be fantastic. And then I think there are people like Jim Acosta who want to make himself part of the story. And in making himself part of the story, he always gets the story wrong because the story is never about what actually happened. The story is about how he was treated. And he wants to make a spectacle of himself. And I guess he wants his own news show or something. And so he makes himself a spectacle. And I got a problem with that. I do. I've got a problem with Chris Cuomo on CNN, who is a Democrat, who is a partisan, who is the son of the former Democratic governor of New York, is the brother of the current Democratic governor of New York, who clearly is a partisan. Man, Roger Ailes and I one time had a fantastic conversation about Chris Cuomo. Was not a fan. And Cuomo's a partisan hack. He is. Occasionally, I remember a couple of months ago, or no, it was last month when the Iranian response to with their impotent missile strike, Cuomo had on a general and actually had a really good interview with the guy. And I gave him credit for it. But that's like the exception to the rule of how bad he is when it comes to dealing with Republicans. CNN's got a lot of people who are broken by the president, don't like the president. When I was at CNN, I would have people come up to me and whisper, I read your stuff. Why could, you know what, Fox people come to me and say, hey, it's the resurgent guy, or it's the red state guy, or I love your stuff. At CNN, it was always a whisper. Why? Why do you have to whisper? Because there are a lot of people on the left. There are really good people, and I like to defend them. But there are some really bad people, and I don't care to defend them. But it's amazing how the New York Times is so relentlessly anti-Donald Trump that they will run a story and get the substance of it wrong, that the Russians are trying to steal the election for Trump. And at the same time, run a poor, pitiful us op-ed without any question from the Taliban, from a man who has directly overseen the killing of Americans. And they wonder why the Americans don't trust the press.
Well connected and well respected.
The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I'll spend a little more time on the New York Times story later. We got to get into the Collins-Loeffler match, unfortunately. I'll give you my candid thoughts on that when we come back. But right now, let's just enjoy this commentary.
And I don't know if anybody watched last night's debate. It got very big ratings. And you know what? Mini Mike didn't do well last night. I was going to send him a note saying it's not easy doing what I do, is it? Not easy. It's not easy, Mike. Not easy for any of them. No, Mike didn't do too well. He went way down. It's all right. Mini Mike. How about Klobuchar? Did you see her? She choked. She choked. She choked. She couldn't breathe. Alfred Newman looked at her and said something slightly derogatory. And she said, "Are you accusing me of being dumb?" Who would make a statement like that? Because that's really what he was doing, but he doesn't want to say that. No, how about that? Are you saying I'm dumb? That was the end of her campaign in my book, you know. You don't say that. Even if it's true, you don't say that, right?
Oh, well, he also had choice words about the Academy Awards and the Parasite movie.
By the way, how bad were the Academy Awards this year? Did you see it? And the winner is a movie from South Korea. What the hell was that all about? We got enough problems with South Korea with trade. On top of it, they give him the best movie of the year. Was it good? I don't know. You know, I'm looking for like, where let's get Gone with the Wind. Can we get like Gone with the Wind back, please?
I think he did that because he knows it's my wife's
Boulevard.
favorite.
So many great movies. The winner is from South Korea. I thought it was best foreign film, right? Best foreign movie. No, it was did this ever happen before? And then you have Brad Pitt. I was never a big fan of his. He got up, said a little wise guy statement. Little wise guy. He's a little wise guy. We were defeated in the debates. Well, I defeated crooked Hillary every time. And by a lot. No way. Yeah, she's crooked as a $3 bill. You know, I was going, whatever happened to the 33,000 emails? Whatever happened? 33,000, she deleted them and acid washed them, and she didn't get in trouble. Can you imagine if a Republican did that? They would want to bring back the death penalty, right? Two standards, but I think things are happening. I think, you know, I said drain the swamp. I just never knew how deep it was. We have more garbage in the swamp than you would ever believe.
You know, I realize the media deeply hates the Trump rallies and believes that they're terrible, awful things, but can we acknowledge that he's really good? He's really good on the campaign stage. Whether you like him or not, he's actually deeply entertaining. He gets the entertainment value. The Democrats don't. My computer went to sleep on me. Had to wake it up. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show across the state of Georgia. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. This hour, like last hour, brought to you by Dynamic Money. If you want to be a sponsor of the program, reach out to us. But Dynamic Money, Chris Burns, who filled in for me on Tuesday, good friend, my financial advisor, decided they wanted to advertise and get awareness out there about them. They're really, really good. They've helped us get out of debt. It was great. Really, really good guy. Really good company. Really helpful. They teach you budgeting. They put you on a budget. They work with you on getting rid of your debt. They work with you on retirement strategies and adjusting and getting you comfortable with the risk level. It's been wonderful to go through the process. And they'll meet you wherever you are. And you can FaceTime, you can Skype, you can do video. You don't have to get to their office in Atlanta. Anywhere you are in the country, they're willing to help. Go to dynamicmoney.com and thank you to them for their sponsorship. One bit of housekeeping before we get into the Loeffler-Collins race. I'm going to start with a phone call here in just a minute. And the phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, again, 877-973-7425. I'm going to send out a recipe here in a little bit if you want it. You know, I'm a native of Louisiana. And one of the traditional dishes in Louisiana, it's like an empanada. It's a Natchitoches meat pie. Now, if you ever see the name Natchitoches, you won't know it's pronounced Natchitoches. That's how you can tell a native of Louisiana from someone who's not a native of Louisiana. If you're not a native of Louisiana, it's Natchitoches, but it's actually Natchitoches. And it's Natchitoches meat pies. You can fry them, but I've got a baked meat pie recipe. And it's basically, you get the trinity, the green pepper, the celery, the onion, you mix it with hamburger meat and spices, and you make a pie dough, and you make these little meat pies. They're fantastic. Now, sadly, most people in my family are picky eaters, and they don't eat the Natchitoches meat. It's not that they don't like mine, but they don't eat them at all. But they're really good. And they're easy to make. You can use a Pillsbury pie dough from the grocery store if you don't want to make your own, but it's easy to make the pie dough as well. If you want the recipe, text the word recipe to 33777. Text the word recipe to 33777. I will get you on the list for the Natchitoches meat pie. And now I'm going to begin the program with, all right, is it Javi in Athens?
Yes, sir.
How are you?
You said it right. I'm doing fine, thank you. How are you, sir?
Good.
So I had two questions. If you can't answer the second one, that's fine. But the first one was about the Senate race, and the question is, why is Doug Collins so insistent in running? And I heard you yesterday. You said that they agree in virtually almost everything. So my question is he running for selfish purposes, or what? For so he can get recognized, or what? And then the second question is, more of a religion question, I guess I would say. I'm a Christian, non-denominational, and my question is, why are there so many denominations if, there's only, it's just Christianity?
There's one Jesus in a million denominations.
It's like Christianity is one religion, but there's so many denominations, and I just don't get that.
Well,
okay.
All right, Avi, I'm going to answer the second one first. I wasn't expecting to do a religion segment here, but I'm going to go for the second one first. Why are there so many denominations? Well, there are. If you go all the way back to the Catholic Orthodox split, and there was a big issue over the Filioque clause in the Nicene Creed, does the Holy Spirit proceed from the Father or from the Father and the Son? And in Western churches, we say in the Nicene Creed that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, and that is the Orthodox churches. This is the original split is no, the Holy Spirit only proceeds from the Father if you're in the Orthodox Church. Western churches, Protestant churches, Catholic churches believe otherwise. Now, that actually impacts your theology to some degree, and it impacts your Christology on how you view Jesus as to whether or not you think the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son or just from the Father. Now let's set that aside to the bigger issue in the Protestant church of the reason is because after the Protestant Reformation, you used to have a pope who who basically dictated this is what we believe, and you had the history and the magisterium and the beliefs. Well, the Protestants rejected all of that, and so it became a free-for-all of I read the Bible and I interpret it this way. And I and all of my friends who interpret the Bible this way, we're going to go off in our direction and other people in the other direction. Now, ultimately, everyone accepts the foundational parts. There is, just as there is a Trinity, and by the way, I do subscribe to the belief that you have to be a believer in the Trinity to be an Orthodox Christian, an actual Christian. You got to believe in the Trinity. I realize the word Trinity is not anywhere in the Bible, but it is very clear that there is a Father, a Son, and a Holy Spirit, and that they are one entity. And therefore, it is a triune God. And you got to believe that to be a Christian. I believe that. And that's why there are Christians say that Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, and the Jehovah's Witnesses are not technically within Christianity because they reject the Trinity. This was something we fought over in the 300s with Constantine and settled on this. When you get to the modern day churches, a lot of the disputes are over governance. And that's why you have so many different denominations. The Baptists believe that each church is congregational and distinct. They also believe in believers' baptism, that you grow up and you get dunked, and that's when you become a member of the church. Most of Christianity, including most of Protestantism, believes in infant baptism. That circumcision in the Old Testament was the sign that you were within God's people, and then Jesus replaced that with baptism. And in the early church, you found that it was not just adults who were getting baptized, but families were getting baptized themselves as a sign that they were within the family of God. And so most do that. And then within those, there's also the governance issue. Presbyterianism, for example, has a general session, and churches are accountable to sessions, and you've got elders and you've got deacons. Most of the major divisions within churches today are over the issue of church governance. Is each church independent, or are churches part of something larger? From there, you get the quibbles of faith. I like to call them. Everybody agrees except Jesus as your Lord and Savior. You become you're a Christian, and there are parts of that you got to believe in the physical resurrection of God. You got to believe in the virgin birth. You got to believe in the Trinity. Within there are all sorts of boundaries of faith. You can believe all sorts of things as long as you accept that, one, Jesus is Lord and Savior, and there is a Trinity. Two, that there is a virgin birth, and three, that there is a resurrection. And within there are all sorts of quibbling over how people prioritize faith. And it's those priorities of faith that have divided churches over time. Ultimately, though, whether you're a Baptist or a Methodist or a Presbyterian or a Catholic or an Orthodox or Pentecostal, you name it, ultimately, what it comes down to is, do you believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior? Probing them on Jesus, you realize that this is someone they've concocted in their head and not the actual Jesus of Scripture. But if you believe in the Jesus of Scripture, you're going to heaven. It doesn't matter. You, in your faith, may emphasize believers' baptism and an independent congregation. You may, in your church, believe in infant baptism, and it's not real, and you may go somewhere else. You may emphasize the magisterium and the history of the church and be Catholic. And I know a lot of Protestants think Catholics aren't going to heaven, and a lot of Catholics think Protestants aren't going to heaven, and I'm not going to go there. You're all going to heaven if you believe in Jesus Christ, the actual one of the Bible. But how you quibble about church governance and stuff, that's where you get denominations. I hope that makes sense. More long-winded than I intended. You know where most non-denominational churches are? They're actually Southern Baptists and don't want to call themselves that. Not all of them, but a great many independent churches and non-denominational churches are actually Southern Baptist churches, but they've decided to brand themselves as something other than that. They don't actually participate in the Southern Baptist Convention, but a lot of those pastors come out of Southern, Southeastern. I'm actually in Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary right now, probably headed back to Reformed Theological, where I was for a couple of years, several years working on my master's, and moved into a PhD program, but I think I need to go finish. I think Doug Collins is running because he's been in the House for a number of years. He's no longer in the majority. And if you were not in the majority and Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, would you want to stay? He wants to stay in politics. He doesn't want to stay with Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. He knows, even if he won't admit, the Republicans aren't taking the House of Representatives back in 2020 with Kelly Loeffler, who he knows, and we all know because we've seen the ads, that she's not as charismatic on the campaign trail as he is.
Hello, Eric. You know what? Can I pivot to a theological question and then back to my politics?
We'll have theology today, yes.
So here's my interpretation of, if in death, why would you not? Could you not be an Orthodox Christian in that case?
Wait, if you believe the Bible says what about hell?
That it is real, that it punishes, that it's painful, but that it ends ultimately immortality. Conditional immortality is more precise.
So there are a lot of people. In fact, I believe Seventh-day Adventists believe in annihilationism, that essentially you go get punished for a while, and then verses in the Bible that talk about it going on forever. But, there are also a lot of verses in the Bible that seem to suggest that there are some people who they have no relationship with God. So, and I could go down a rabbit hole and probably spend the next hour and a half on it, but I probably shouldn't. I will say, though, I think if you read if you accept the actual Jesus of the Bible as your Lord and Savior, you accept that he physically died, rose again from the dead, was born of a virgin, I think I'll see you in shocked that there aren't as many people as you expected.
More news, quote, news unquote, about Russia.
Right.
Supposedly they're going to interfere in the election again. Somehow if they love Trump so much, they weren't able to get the Congress last time around, but I just don't know if the right question is how stupid.
I talked about this in the first hour of the show. The New York Times is running this salacious story, and they've got everybody buzzing about it. And Jake Tapper from CNN has come out and said he's talked to an intelligence official he loves, or he shouldn't say love, explicitly trusts. And the intelligence official says the New York Times and these 5 Democrats who talked to the New York Times are not only explicitly mischaracterizing the testimony, but that there were Democrats in the room who interfere in the election and sow discord, which is working. And that it's not that they back Donald Trump. It's that they see Donald Trump as someone they can do business with, and they're not yet sure about the Democrats. Now, you and I both know if Bernie Sanders is the nominee, the Russians are going to put their full weight behind the Soviet apologist as opposed to Donald Trump. But it has nothing to do with them trying to steal the election for Trump.
Historically, being this good, he has about a 75% chance of getting reelected, and it's probably just clickbait.
I think it is. I think it's derangement by the press. And David, thanks very much for the phone call. It's derangement by the press that can't acknowledge the fact that Donald Trump is actually would win re-election by winning the key swing state of Wisconsin. He would lose Pennsylvania, Michigan, but would win Wisconsin along with the other key swing states, and we get 270 electoral college votes, which is what he needs. Now, it is no coincidence that the media is suddenly upping the Russia wants to steal it for Trump stuff. They can't beat him fair and square. What do? They undermine the integrity of the election, and they undermine the integrity of the Electoral College, as opposed to trying to win under the rules set forth by the Founding Fathers, who, are all racist now. Instead of trying to win under those rules, they've decided they just want to undermine the integrity of the election. Now, when we come back, I promise there is news on the Loeffler-Collins front, including what the president suggested about Doug Collins and Doug Collins' response.
I really do like his opinion on things.
All right. The news on the Collins Loeffler race. Well, I will continue taking your phone calls, theology and all. 877-97 Eric, 877-973-7425. The Loeffler Collins race. The president last night suggested that he would like to appoint Doug Collins to be the director of national intelligence and get him out of the race. There are a couple of things here. First of all, Doug Collins says he would not accept it. He wants to run for the Senate. He's not going to go be the director of national intelligence. There is an underlying premise here, if we're honest about it as well, that one, the president is difficult to work with in that position, and two, the position's not permanent. It's if the president loses, you're out of a job, and if the president wins, he may fire you. The Senate would be more stable, and you'd have 2 years before you ran again, and then 6 years if you won that time. Remember, Loeffler will be on the ballot now for you to affirm or reject the governor's choice, and then she's only there to finish Johnny Isakson's term, which will be 2022. So if she wins this time, Collins could run again in 2 years and run against her then. But nonetheless, that's the setup. So we'll see whether or not they actually work on this. Now, I gotta tell you, I want to spend a little bit of time on this race when we come back. The Loeffler team, by the way, she was at Swift and Fitch in Rome. She was in Bartow County. If y'all have never been up to Rome, Swift and Finch is one of the greatest coffee shops in the state of Georgia. So was it on Broad Street? I think it replaced, maybe it's been there for a while. There used to be a coffee shop there. When years ago I was working for a candidate, and there was a pizza place and then there was the coffee shop, and I had to crash in Rome for a week at a time. I mean, I was I guess 28, 29. And me and a couple of the people from the campaign, there was a little pizza place right there in downtown Rome, and we would go have several pitchers of beer at night and then get up in the morning hungover and go to the coffee shop. And I fell in love with Rome as a young person, drinking too much in Rome, working campaigns, which is what you do when you're young and on campaigns, and then getting lots of coffee the next day. I love it. And now when we go up to Rome, we go up a lot of times. We'll go up to Barnsley Gardens in Adairsville, and then we'll go over to Rome for a day and hang out. And I always go to Swift and Finch. It is a fantastic little coffee shop. And what's the outfitter there? There's a great outfitter shop down there by the river in Rome. I love it. Go in there all the time. In fact, I got one of the hammocks. I got a lot of stuff from there. In fact, I got a new kayak paddle from there just a while back. I love my kayak. But anyway, so she was at Swift and Finch, which was a great coffee shop in Rome. Had a big turnout there, about 50 people. The Darlington school kids showed up. She was in Bartow County, and then she hopped on a plane. She flew to Macon. She had a campaign stop in Macon, and then she got on the plane and she flew to Washington because she's got a private plane. And naturally, the Collins folks are attacking her for having a private. She bought it with her own money. It's not her husband's plane. You know, Claire McCaskill in Missouri became a campaign attack on her because she was using her husband's plane in Missouri. And Kelly Loeffler has the money to buy herself her own plane. I'm kind of jealous. I want a private plane. I do. I want a national radio show, and then I want to be able to afford it. I don't need my own plane. The upkeep and maintenance would be silly. I could use NetJets, but man, I am so tired of being yelled at in the airport. You would be amazed the number of times I've been yelled at while peeing in the Atlanta airport. Now I got to go in the stall, and then they still see me in the bathroom washing my hands and get upset with me. And it's always Republicans, by the way. I always say something to make someone mad. I wasn't Trumpy enough, or I didn't defend the governor enough, or David Perdue enough. It's silly. Now, I got more thoughts on the Loeffler Collins race when we come back. Man, this is something to contemplate. My Twitter friend Stephen Duffield noting he had rewatched Lonesome Dove. And no, he watched it for the first time. Wow. Said in the next 5 to 7 years, we're likely to lose Gene Hackman, who's 89, Robert Duvall, who's 90, and Clint Eastwood, who's 89. The collective work of the three is stunning to contemplate. Wow, it really is. It really is. What neat people. What amazing actors. It really is something. Now, I don't want to dwell there. I'm happy to take your phone call, by the way. 404-872-0750-1-800 WSB Talk. I've got my column up at theresurgent.com this morning. It's actually my newspaper column for the Macon Telegraph for this Sunday on my frustrations with the Collins-Loeffler race, and I mentioned this some yesterday as well. Both campaigns are attacking the other on who has hugged Stacey Abrams the most. If you listen to the Collins camp, they actually started it, to be fair. They're the ones who came out first swinging with Stacey Abrams and Kelly Loeffler at a WNBA event for the Atlanta, whatever the WNBA team is. And assuming Loeffler participated and was involved, et cetera, in doing a fundraiser for Stacey Abrams, Doug Collins, the Loeffler team pushback, is such good friends with Stacey Abrams that she named a character in one of her romance novels, Doug Collins. She actually did. And Collins, they pushed out a video from him from a couple of weeks ago talking about how he and Stacey Abrams are such good friends, etc. I don't care. Y'all, I've actually gotten hate mail because I made this point in the column this morning. I think Stacey Abrams is a fine person with whom I disagree on everything. I have plenty of friends of mine who I disagree with vehemently on politics. Stacey Abrams is not a friend of mine. I don't know her well. I have spent time with her. I interviewed her for an hour on a stage. And I have a bias when you have been in politics as much as I have, doing what I've been doing for the number of years. It is refreshing to find a politician who can laugh at themselves and make self-deprecating remarks. It just is. It's just, y'all, I got a real problem with the politicians who don't have a sense of humor about themselves. And Abrams does, and I find it refreshing. And I've got several friends of mine who are Republicans who say she's actually behind the scenes. You can work with her. You can find common ground on some issues. I've never found common ground on issues with her. I disagree with her on everything. I'm not going to defend her, but I will tell you this whole idea that the other side is bad and they're your enemy, I find appalling in a country that premised itself on the idea that Jefferson and Adams could say terrible things about each other and then go work for the greater good of the country together. And we've gotten away from that. And really, we've gotten away from it because there are so many small issues left and everyone has a hill to die on now. And you can be offended with me. You can change the radio. I apologize to the program directors for sabotaging their stations, but that's the way I feel about it. I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian. I disagree with her on everything, and I don't hate her. I'm sorry. And I don't really want to apologize about it, but I find it genuinely appalling that we're running this race over who has hugged Stacey Abrams the most. Why is she relevant? The reason she's relevant is because let's talk about the issue. Let's talk about abortion. Doug Collins opposes it. Kelly Loeffler opposes it. Doug Collins supports a 20-week abortion ban. Kelly Loeffler supports a 20-week abortion ban. Let's talk about the Second Amendment. Kelly Loeffler supports it. Doug Collins supports it. Kelly Loeffler is opposed to an assault weapons ban. Doug Collins is opposed to an assault weapons ban. Kelly Loeffler doesn't want gun regulation. Doug Collins doesn't want gun regulation. What else? Impeachment. Kelly Loeffler opposed impeaching the president. Doug Collins opposed impeaching the president. Kelly Loeffler supported the president. Doug Collins supported the president. On the military, she supports a robust military and more funding for the military. Doug Collins supports a robust military, funding for the military. They don't disagree on a single issue. I guess the only issue on which they may disagree is whether or not you can stand or sit to use the bathroom, and that has to do with one's a woman and one's a man. And so they don't really even disagree on that. Y'all, come on. This is stupid. And I resent like hell that we have to have this primary. I trust the governor. If Doug Collins was running and the governor had not picked Loeffler, I would be on the Doug Collins bandwagon today. yesterday. But the governor picked Kelly Loeffler. And so I'm willing to support the governor. I'm willing to march with the governor on this issue because the governor has had conservatives' backs, and so I'm willing to have the governor's back on this. And here's what we're actually fighting over in this race. We're actually fighting over the proposition that Kelly Loeffler will grow in office, that she isn't the conservative she claims to be. That's what this race is really about. If you listen to the supporters of Doug Collins, they will tell you she's a closeted squish. And that once she has a full 6-year term, she will grow in office. You know, if we believe that, we got to point out that the Heritage Action for America scorecard has Doug Collins as the second worst Republican from Georgia in Congress. They say he's bad on amnesty. I mean, if we're going to go there with her, do we need to not look at Doug Collins' record since he's been in Congress? Because there are a lot of people who would note that in years where there's no election, Doug Collins actually isn't a Republican who aligns very well with, for example, the House Freedom Caucus. And in years where there is an election, he does very well on the House Freedom Caucus list and the conservative scorecards. Are we supposed to bring that? This is why it's so stupid, because he's a good guy and we all agree on most of the issues. And we're having to have this fight and we're dividing the Republican Party in Georgia at a time we need absolute unity. Now, there is an upside. Georgia Republicans tend to have a history of disagreeing with each other and staying home when their candidate loses. When, for example, Casey Cagle lost in the runoff to Brian Kemp, one of the things that happened in the general election is some Casey Cagle supporters didn't go vote in the governor's race, and that's one of the reasons it was close. Wasn't a huge number, but it was enough. We see this time and time again. In the David Perdue, Jack Kingston, Karen Handel primary, there were Handel and Kingston supporters who ultimately decided not to support David Perdue. They took their ball and went home. And if we had a primary in Georgia, as Collins and David Ralston wanted, you would see people show up in November and they would just skip that. Collins didn't win or Loeffler didn't win, they would just skip it. By not having a primary and having them both on the ballot, what you have is a situation where all the Republicans are going to turn out. Every Republican's going to turn out. They're going to turn out for the president. They're going to turn out for David Perdue, and they're going to turn out for Loeffler or Collins. So you will have maximum Republican turnout, and no one will skip the ballot line. And now you've got Ed Tarver entering the race. So you've got Matt Lieberman in the race, you've got Ed Tarver in the race, and you've got Raphael Warnock coming into the race. And all of them are candidates who are going to have a core constituency. Lieberman has a lot of money. He's raised close to $1 million now. The Democrats don't want him in the race, and by God, he's going to be in the race, and he's not getting out. And so you're going to maximize Republican turnout. You could very well see a situation where you have two Republicans in the runoff, and then we're all winners. We're all winners. If Collins and Loeffler are in a runoff together, we all win. And if it's just one Republican in the runoff, well, we all win because the Republican's going to run the runoff as well. But we shouldn't have to have this race. The money that's going to be spent on this race is not going to be spent on the Perdue race. It's not going to be spent on the president's race. It's not going to be spent to take back the House or to save the House. It's not going to be spent to save the Senate. It's not going to be spent for other races that matter in the state of Georgia and beyond. It's going to be there. And now it's just gotten silly. So, for example, Kelly Loeffler, as I mentioned in the last segment, has a private plane. She bought herself a private plane. And the benefit of Loeffler buying herself a private plane, she pays for it out of her own pocket, is she was in Bartow County the other day. She was in Bartow County, and then she drove over. I don't know if she drove in her Kia or not. She went out and bought a Kia. Drove from Bartow County over to Swift and Finch in Rome, the great little coffee shop there. and then got on a plane, flew to Macon, got on her private plane, flew to Macon, did an event down in Middle Georgia with Middle Georgia leaders, went back to the airport, got on the plane, and flew to Washington, D.C. so she could be at a vote. She did not fly commercial, and the Collins camp is now attacking her for flying. And, because she didn't fly commercial, she flew on her husband's private jet. Loeffler could actually capitalize on this by making the jet a part of her campaign. That she cares so much about Georgia, she can hop from one point to another. So she can go from Waycross to Bainbridge to Rome to Macon to Savannah to Augusta to Habersham County and beyond and back to Atlanta all in one day, making copious campaign trips and bring her staff with her and have a great time and be seen everywhere if she does it right and brands it right. And that's something that's got to be done. Claire McCaskill flubbed it. It wasn't her jet. It was her husband's jet. And she came across as out of touch and aloof. She didn't want to get her hands dirty on the campaign trail. Loeffler's going to get her hands dirty on the campaign trail. All of this, if I sound annoyed, I am. It's just it's dumb. We're talking about two people who agree on every issue, who are trying to convince you that the other one is bad. And they're both good people, and I hate it, and I wish Doug Collins hadn't run. If the governor had appointed Collins, I would be out there helping him. And I don't know Loeffler well. I know Doug Collins, and I like him tremendously. But I know the governor, and I trust the governor, and it was his right to make the pick, and it just kind of reeks of sour grapes that people are contesting. And now you got the president coming out saying he wants Collins to be the director of national intelligence, and Collins says, I'm not interested. And, there's one thing I know about this president. This president doesn't particularly care for people who look a gift horse in the mouth when he's the gift horse. And so I don't know that you're going to, I wonder if you're going to see the president come out less subtly for Loeffler. Because, the Collins team, their spin has been that the president's going to put Loeffler somewhere, that the president really wants Collins in the Senate, doesn't really want Loeffler in the Senate. And here comes the president saying, no, I want Loeffler in the Senate and I want Collins over here. And Collins says, no, thanks. I want to be in the Senate. And I wonder if the president's going to do something on that. I have no idea. If I could have 3 senators, I would have Loeffler, Collins, and Perdue. I didn't support David Perdue in 2014. And I didn't support David Perdue because he came from corporate America. And typically, corporate CEOs are terrible politicians, and they are big on crony capitalism. And we got to get into the subject of crony capitalism when we come back, as a matter of fact. But they're bad on spending issues. They're bad on fiscal issues. And so it's like, I'll vote for him if he's the nominee, but I'm not going to support him in the primary. And man, I'm glad he won. I'm glad I was wrong. He's fantastic. Now, Karen Handel's a dear friend of mine. I supported her. But Perdue is fantastic. Perdue is an amazing senator. If I could clone David Perdue and get him elected in every state, I would. We have 2 good senators in Georgia. And they'll both be on the ballot in November. And it is unfortunate we're going to have to waste resources on the special election that could be spent elsewhere. If Doug Collins beats Kelly Loeffler, let's be honest, he could, because she hadn't gotten her sea legs when it comes to campaigning. He's really good, and she's not when it comes to campaigning. If that's the case, I'll be out there. I mean, if he gets into a runoff against one of the Democrats, I'll be out there knocking on every door. And I want him to come on the show, by the way. I love Doug Collins. I don't want to ask him a single hostile interview question. I want him to come on, and I want him to be able to make his case. Why him, not her? I want her to come on and be able to make her case. Why her, not him? In fact, I want the Democrats to come on too. I want Matt Lieberman to come on. I want to have a conversation with all of these people. I want a conversation with every single one of these candidates of why them. I don't even want them to make it about the other side. What is their issue? What do they want to do for Georgia? I like doing that. There's no reason to have to make it about the other side. Sell yourself. And if you can't sell yourself without saying the other person is bad, I don't like that in a politician. I want a politician to be able to sell themselves. And I may not agree with them. But sell yourself without having to attack the other side. And right now, because these candidates on the Republican side, Loeffler and Collins, are identical on every issue, they're just savaging each other personally. And I think we're missing out, and we're harming and dividing a Republican Party in Georgia that needs to be united.
News and in-depth analysis from
Y'all remember, one, this hour is sponsored by Dynamic Money. If you need help with your retirement planning or family budgeting or teaching your kids budgeting skills, dynamicmoney.com. Those guys really can help you. Number two, text the word recipe to 33777 because I'm going to send out my recipe for Natchitoches meat pies. Now, a buddy of mine is harassing me in text message, and I'm not reading the text messages, Charlie. I just see the little notification pop up on the screen. He's harassing me that they're not fried, they're baked. I actually like them better baked. And the reason I like them better baked is because the pie dough recipe flakes up better when you bake them. Yes, it's healthier, but listen, have y'all seen me? Have you seen the live stream? Y'all, I eat fried food. I'm just going to tell you. And I like a fried empanada, but the Natchitoches meat pie, you bake them, and they're really good. And you're going to want this recipe. So text recipe to 33777. Now, I want to spend a moment on the capitalism, crony capitalism, free market stuff. There is a new conservative group that has cropped up, essentially to shift conservatism away from libertarian free marketeering. And I'm probably going to agree a bunch. The idea that the Republicans in this country have actually promoted free marketeering. The Republicans in this country, in charge of leadership at the federal and the state level, for by and large here in Georgia, have been outright whores to the Chamber of Commerce, has been big on crony capitalism, restructuring government to give kickbacks to major corporations. And one of the problems that we have in this country, objectively, is that it is harder and harder for and we do need to tear down those barriers. For example, in the 80s and the 90s, the Apple Macintosh system, so long as the Windows system used different code and came up with the same thing. And it allowed innovation and in competition. But now there was always a rule of thumb that you could use patent law to protect devices from running software that wasn't yours if you made the device. So, for example, if Apple made the Macintosh, you could use patent law to prevent other people from writing software to take over a Macintosh. You could do that. Windows, of course, couldn't have that because Windows was designed to work on any PC, whether the processor was Intel or ADM, or AMD rather. We need to get back to software by copyright because you're allowing a bunch of patent trolls to block software innovation by saying, oh, I came up with this random software tool that you completely came up with differently with different code, but because I came up with it first, I'm putting you out of business. And these massive corporations buy up these patents and they shut down the little guy. Or you have a situation like we had for years in Georgia until Brian Kemp became governor, actually, where you had a bunch of Republicans who would give huge tax breaks for Fortune 500 companies to come to Georgia and compete against Georgia companies. That always struck me as one of the most absurd policy positions of Republicans in this state was, let's go give a Fortune 500 company money, your taxpayer dollars, to move their corporate headquarters to Georgia. Never mind that Georgia has an up-and-coming competitor to that business. We're going to give priority to the Fortune 500 company. Or there is no competitor in Georgia, but there are a bunch of businesses in Georgia that are growing that we should help. But no, we're not. We're going to go to the Fortune 500 company. We're going to give the tax breaks to them and the tax incentives to them and the money to them to come to the state. That's terrible, and that's what we've done because Republicans are whores to the Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber of Commerce is not all bad, don't get me wrong, but the Chamber of Commerce is about big business. And the United States has always been a country that prided itself in the ability of small businesses, the Davids of the corporate world, to take on the Goliaths of the corporate world and win. And the Chamber has by and large become an entity that protects the Goliaths, and the Republicans have helped. Don't give me this garbage that we have a free market system in this country anymore when the Republicans explicitly have been working to make it less so, to make it more cronyist. And you know what happens when you have a bunch of cronies? You have a bunch of people who say maybe we should do socialism if everybody's going to be in the tank like this. Welcome. It is Natchitoches meat pies. It is comfort food. You mix it with, well, you won't eat them with me. And they're store-bought pie dough. So it's a word recipe to 337. And I can't, but better than a story. $10 to ball schedule got a big boost with a hefty price. The Cowboys during the September 18th won the game rivalry series being hosted by the Charlotte Sports meeting between the schools, the first since 2014. The Chick-fil-A, can't believe they scheduled it out that far. Clemson's other non-conference games in 40 win. Fascinating. I don't pay a ton in Athens, our flagship, but frankly, when she starts doing so the Russian in, let me read you again, if you New York Times, and everybody now has it. Steal it for Donald Trump. You've got a freaking obfuscation on the part of the media before I get into traction. And there's for those of you listening, Landers is now in the Joe Biden. He's going to lose it. He's out of money. And what's happening is Bernie's going up.
Sanders, I thought it was a great night for.
Don't see him having any shit.
He would burn. It'll be a blowout.
Nobody just says the obvious. Bernie, you're full of it. They're just pandering to the Bernie people. And you know what pandering gets you? Nothing. It certainly doesn't get your respect.
Tom Perez needs to step down. He's a joke. He's a clown. He can't run the Democratic Party anymore. It's lost its way. I don't see how death sentence for the party, and
I believe in the markets.
And Bernie ain't going to work in the United States.
Before I get to Jake Tapper's tweet,
that the candidates from about the bad behavior past, they're just. I believe in the markets. 72 with the Democratic. I'm so happy that they defeated
the media is upset. They're all upset. They're working in the heartland. The official I know and trust pushes back. He has concluded the Russians are trying to help Trump again, but the intelligence doesn't say that. The official says the problem is Shelby's interpretation of the intelligence is not that they prefer him over Sanders. Challenging the intelligence conclusion from a member of the House is completely different. Porter, accurate in its coverage. I'm going to go with you've got the Democrats. Is written by Lena Sun. Hours of a rainy Monday. Medical masks and gloves. Virus had new test results. Or leave them behind. Trump administration health closure. But officials not be flown back with the unaffected private conversations. The argument, but a move that would nearly improvising the response had revealed the limit and could become a full-blown Americans from the Diamond Princess. This is a problem all home. Or the bureaucrat.
Honest news and
Winston, and he's got a and they do. You're telling on the map, and he would lose his popularity with Cuban Americans as the white counterparts. It's with how low one can go there. People will routinely vote against Bernie Sanders' map. Interestingly enough, be able to pick up Minnesota, New Mexico, changes with the president. You know, I saw somebody 9 months he would cruise very credible in November, but Donald still get elected as president. to go out at 12:30. So the meat pie recipe address, and you're to 33777 ground garlic. Man, it's in a box and it comes. You text the word recipe to 33. He won Bernie. This is from Axios. Seal the deal for both. But Bloomberg's own spin is simple: recover at the next debate, because I worry we may. Now, here's the thing: delegates, his money can buy in Nevada, and he's going to. Buttigieg is going to do what I got up. Starts talking, and she says, kind of.
What I want to see is sales, but a Green New Deal, I don't think it goes far enough.
All media has always loved. They've been. You got the president now going to Colorado, taking on windmills.
And we are independent. Can you wind blow wind, please? Oh, a balding, not like crazy. And they're making them, and they don't out of here. And they're all, every major Democrat.
You know, south of Atlanta, I have constantly in the last several years seen windmill blades coming down the interstate on tractor trailer trucks with police escort. And, you know, for the longest time, I thought it was they build the 787 in Charleston. And the 787 has, but they also they truck a lot of them in. And I've been seeing these wings handily to my father-in-law, and he said, "No, those are for wind. And no, these are eights." And bald eagle can be longer than a Boeing 7 Alyssum fiber wrapped to a tractor whose day breaks the spring bills. The U.S. through at least 2022, according to what they are now. Search for alternative cities, South Dakota will be there ultimately forever. LSA, which is searching. This is really rich, y'all. It's called the fourth generation, I believe. You got to put them somewhere, put on trains for them. So what do you manufacture new nuclear energy? Environmentalists are opposed to anything that would actually the solar, the rare earth minerals you got to get than they used to be back in the job and on the White House. But oh my goodness, we can't. And you can use the spent land or you know. Have you ever noticed that they want us to rely just on wind and solar power? There's a time that we used to rely on wind and solar power in the world, and we called it the Dark Ages. Because believe it or not, there are times the sun doesn't shine power plant to get your base power going. You can't. You get hot days out there, and everybody has to live in a blackout because there's not enough power to go around because they made it. And now you got Elizabeth Warren come. What about all the? She doesn't. How dare you being sexist? No, come across as likable. I referred to respect, but come on. She was the mother-in-laws of exes, and it just. But man, yes we cankle instead of yes, and say you probably shouldn't say this stuff. But come on, you can be funny about it. Be Saint Elizabeth. She may be the kindest, warmest, friendliest person, but he's actually a very funny, affable person. He comes on stage. Even Bernie on occasion will laugh at himself, even though he comes across as angry on stage all the time. But Warren doesn't. And now you got her out there saying all these things. And she's trying to back the Green New Deal and the environmentalists. She's trying to get the left on board with her. She's trying to make a case for herself. The media is trying to help her to come back. All the headlines today after the Russia wants Trump, the headlines are all Elizabeth Warren's comeback. Can it happen? Can she rebound? Give her more money. You know, she raised $5 million in less than 24 hours after the Nevada debate. So she's going to keep going. Amy Klobuchar raised several $1 million after the Nevada debate. She's going to keep going. Pete Buttigieg is going to keep going. Bernie with his lane doing their Bernie Sanders is the nominee. If Bernie Sanders, he's got a plurality of the vote, the place to the really rich irony.
Super Tuesday, and most America thinks that money, industrial Midwestern city. Let's put forward somebody who.